Okay, welcome to chapter 2 of Positivity Bias. And I want to set the stage for class tonight with a personal thought. So we moved when I was growing up, we moved every 3 or so years. So we've been around quite a lot. And I remember that when I was little, we lived in Missouri, and I don't remember much outside the houses next to us. It was my house and the two houses or three houses around on that block, right there. That's it. And we were in a cul-de-sac at the end, right? We moved to Holland, and I started school. So I knew kids from school, but I went to the American School of the International Schools van Den Haag in The Hague in Amsterdam, in The Hague, Holland. And so none of the kids lived nearby. They all came in to the city. So I kind of knew kids in class a little bit, but more that my world was still confined to my block. You know, the neighbors and the kids on my block. Moved back to Missouri, Florissant, Missouri. We were there, and I was there for fourth through ninth grade. And it was the neighborhood. It wasn't just my block, but there was more of a neighborhood, and the kids that we had in school and expanded a little bit. By the time we moved to Houston, Texas, mid-70s, so now I had a driver's license and I had access to a car, and my world expanded much bigger. And I know a lot more people, and not just from school and not just from my class, but all the kids at the Jewish Community Center who were involved in the theater department and on the swimming squad. So my world expanded. I knew more people. Moved to California, finished high school there, went off to college, and again, the world expanded because I knew people not only from my class, but from the Chabad house I was going to, and the folks at API, and the folks from the theater group. And so my whole world just kept expanding bigger and bigger as I got older. And then, of course, you get into community, and then I became a rabbi and was involved in the community and teaching in a school. So in Orange County, California, it was not just Long Beach where my community was, but it was the whole Orange County where we had students from all over the area, and started to get to know their families. And again, the world expands. What was interesting is that when I lived in my small little insular neighborhood of my house or my block or my neighborhood, it was pretty safe and secure with a limited exposure to outside stuff. But as my world grew, my exposure grew. And interestingly enough, so did the pain. Because in my small little world, I didn't know anybody that had major illnesses or had a death in the family, or who had, it was a very sheltered world. But as I left more and more of that sheltered world, I started knowing people that went through major crises, major medical situations, and all kinds of things. And that kind of changed my perspective of the world, because my worldview expanded. I think it's an important part to be aware of, because if all we focus on is the small things that are going on in our little world, we don't see a bigger picture, then we're missing a huge part of what's going on. And having lived in Holland as a kid, having lived in Sydney, Australia in the 90s with my children, I oftentimes think that Americans really ought to have to live overseas for at least 3 years to get an appreciation of what we have here in America, because we're so accustomed to the expectations of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There are a lot of places in the world that don't even have that as an option. And if you're not exposed to that, you don't see those possibilities, right? So where are we choosing to think about? That's the piece we're going to be talking about tonight, is our little world and seeing a much bigger picture than that, rather than having a handful of pieces to a puzzle that doesn't make any sense, 5 random pieces, to having the whole thing, 1,000 pieces to the puzzle, and getting the whole picture, right? So that's the question we're looking at here. And Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of the British Commonwealth,
No relation.
was known to start his some of his presentations when he was talking with a crowd, is he'd hold up a piece of paper with a black dot in it, and he'd say, what do you see? And the common response was a black dot. That's only 5% of what's here. But that's what everyone looks at, because that's the part that's uncommon on that picture. So we tend to focus on negative things. Now, there's a history behind that, which is, and all of those who have been in adverse situations, whether that's actual combat or emergency services, or driving through the south side of Chicago,
or North Philly.
You're on alert.
Yeah.
And you're picking up nuances.
Mhm.
And you are definitely trying to figure out what's safe and what's not safe, right? So there's a purpose for focusing on negative stuff. But you can't live your life like that. We have to be able to get past that thing. So if we focus are always on the negative things, then life is very negative. It's the challenge to look at bigger, better things, right? So there's an interesting page on page 28 in the book. So the Rebbe writes to someone who'd written to him, I received your letter in which you describe your economic circumstances and certain other conditions which are the cause of your dissatisfaction and lack of spiritual gratification. But the last part of this, he says, to go through life in complete happiness is not destined for man. One of the basic things, however, is to have a clear vision on the fundamental issues and to cultivate appropriate expectations and attitudes. So setting the right expectations. If you're going to work in emergency services, if you're going to work in a military environment, you have to have expectations. There's going to be some ugly stuff there. But is that the part you're going to focus on? Is that the part that is that what you're there for? If you're there to serve, it changes the picture. So Judy and I were talking about something previously about experience I had in Cook County Hospital in the ER, but in the psych wing of the ER, and we couldn't restrain someone legally, but we couldn't have anybody else in the same wing because the screaming and the hollering and the dangers, right? So we had 2 security guards there and 1 patient and cleared everybody else out. So, based on expectations, we could say it was a really long, hard, difficult night. Or we could say, hey, we succeeded. We made it through and no one got hurt. Like, that's great.
Like my last Sunday night.
Right? So if we're setting up our expectations of what are we there for? Are we there to serve, and we're there to bring as best a possible outcome as we can? If you work in an emergency room, you're going to lose people. It's the reality, right? Over the years I've been in emergency services, I really only did CPR 1 time, and he didn't make it. So I could get depressed and sad and focused on the fact that the one guy I got to do CPR on didn't make it, right? But on the other hand, all the other things that we did accomplish over the years, and thank God didn't have to deal with multiple CPRs, So we can choose what we want to focus on and the outcomes we're going to look at. Page 29, there's a story here about Maimonides. Now, Maimonides lived in a horrific time in North Africa and actually had to leave. He was forced out of out of his homeland where he grew up, and he ended up living in Egypt. And on his letters that he would write, he would close off his letters with a comment of one who sins every day, because there's a Torah commandment to not ever return to Egypt, and here he is living in Egypt. Well, he's living there because that's the circumstances he has. He had no choice, but it bothered him, right? But when you look at what he focused on the rest of his life, the Torah studies that he did, and he wrote for others, and the people he helped, and the medicine that he did. I mean, the guy had a really, really tough childhood and lots of losses and challenges on the way. But at all times, he kept rising to every occasion. Page 29 at the bottom, we're actually reading from the Guide to the Perplexed by Maimonides. People often think that the evils in the world are more numerous than the good things. Many sayings and songs of the nations dwell on the troubles. I mean, even Yiddish, like how many people say, "Es schwer zu sein a Yid"? It's difficult to be a Jew, right? It's a popular old Yiddish
It's a
saying.
book you're looking at, right? Is
Yes.
this a book you're looking at?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not finding page 29 to contain
Neither am
that.
I. Neither am I.
You may have a
Chapter
different
4,
version.
29.
In our book, it's on page 13.
13, let me see.
Doctor's orders.
Yes,
That's
page
what- yeah,
13.
see.
Okay,
Well,
so
see,
doctor's
Dr.
orders.
Zoll- there it is. Yep.
That's correct, page 13.
All right, thank you for catching that and speaking up.
Okay.
Okay, so doctor's
No,
orders,
you just have to know
Guide
where.
to the Perplexed, right?
Well, that's us.
So he's saying that people often think the world is full of evil,
Mhm.
so that a good thing is found only exceptionally. Evil things are numerous and lasting. Not only common people have to make this mistake, but even many who believe that they are wise. I like the way he says that. Even those who believe they are wise.
Mhm.
This error results from judging the whole universe by what occurs to a single person. Only an ignorant person believes the whole universe exists for them alone, as if nothing else was required for any consideration. Sounds like a toddler, right?
Mhm.
This is why toddlers get easily upset about stuff, because in their world, the one thing that goes wrong, that's their world, man, you know? If therefore anything happens to that person contrary to their expectations, he is at once concludes the whole world is evil. If, however, a person would take into consideration the whole universe, form an idea of the universe, and comprehend what a small portion they are in that universe, then you find the truth.
Mhm.
So the newspapers point the world out to be a horrendous place because all they talk about is all the horrendous things that are going on all over the world, because apparently that sells papers. But again, that's the one black dot on the page. That's the part that they're talking about that sells papers, right? But that only stands out because there's so much good in contrast. That's why the evil stands out. What was the old story about dog bites man is not a story, but man bites dog? Now that's a story,
That would be a story.
right? So we really have to focus on a much bigger picture. And going back to what we talked about in chapter 1, when the Rebbe began his Nesius, his leadership in 51, he talked from the get-go, he talked about this world is God's garden. It's not just any garden, it's God's garden. And it's not just a utilitarian garden, it's a garden of beautiful flowers and sweet-smelling fruits, tasty fruits. It's such a beautiful, amazing garden. We could focus on those things. Stan, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot, but this is a group we've been together for a while. You know, there's never been in my life a time more contrary to what you just said, and that there are some things in the world that are pretty darn bad, and we have to agree to focus on them, even though it's a small portion of the whole population of the earth. You can't deny it, right? What's going on right now.
Mhm.
So could you comment on that in the context of this lesson? This is
Yes. Yes.
maybe it's an anomalous time, but you can't ignore it.
We do have to deal with those things. And we do have to focus on those things, and we're going to come back around to that part of it. But if we look at a bigger picture, right? So how long ago, when we didn't even have an independent state of Jews? That wasn't that long ago. How long ago was it we couldn't even visit Jerusalem? We couldn't even visit the Western Wall? I mean, that's my lifetime. So if we expand the lens and we expand the time frame, so a lot of things are tremendously good this time right now. Yes, we do have to look at the negative, and we do have to focus, and we have to deal with what we can resolve it. But don't lose sight of the fact that I just had heart surgery through the wrist. 50 years ago, someone who had the heart situation I had wouldn't be here. So again, we can get caught up in the negative, but step back. There's a huge amount of tremendous good in the world right now, and we can't lose sight of that. Doesn't mean to neglect the negative stuff and ignore them. No. We have to deal with those. But don't get sucked into the rabbit hole of negativity when there is so much possibility that's there.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies the perspective you're talking about for me. Thank you.
He's a cup half full kind of guy.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know it's more than half.
Yeah.
See, the possibility for good being there doesn't mean it's there, because this day and age, you really have to look hard to find in the greater world anything that is really positive and good.
Yeah.
Because the world is in flames in many different places. And I am unfortunately very much reminded of the years prior to my birth in Germany, where we were in an analogous situation to what we see today. So the danger is there, the danger is real, and we have to face it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. At the same point is that if you're going into a combat situation and all you see is the negative possibilities, you're doomed. You've got to believe
That the other guy is doomed.
this.
Yeah.
That we can do this and we can win this, and we are going to be better off at the end of this than we are coming in. We didn't choose this fight,
True.
but we're certainly going to be the ones to end it.
And you can also see how everyone in the world is pulling together to fight this and to be of assistance on a very large scale.
In an
It's a struggle,
unprecedented
but they're
scale.
doing it.
Yeah, in an unprecedented scale. Nevertheless, yes, you can look at college campuses and you can bemoan the situation that's going on over there. But at the same time, I have on my one of the chat groups I'm on, someone was at a university and there were horrific signs all over on the campus base, right? But that also has the opportunity to flip that around. And he took responsibility and gathered materials, and they have an equal amount to share the other side, the other perspective. And it's up and it's posted. And you can't take down his if you're not going to take down the other. So outside of America, does every place have that opportunity? Independent, democratic countries will allow that. But other places don't. There's still a lot of places you don't have that chance. So again, we do have to deal with it, but don't get caught up in the negative side of it. Think of the potential opportunities that we currently do have that we haven't had in the past, and the support, like Selena was saying, that we have now that we didn't have in the past. On page, well, I won't say the page number, but in the section that says, don't forget what you have, right? So here's the guy who's writing to the Rebbe, and he says he's never experienced goodness in his life. And the Rebbe is saying, wait a second, you're married, you have kids, you have a job, and you're complaining that you never experienced any good in your life?
Woke up this morning.
Yes, right. My uncle used to say, check the newspapers, I'm not listed in the obituary, must be a good day.
We're,
You set the bar very high, but let me.
I'm a medical person like Judy, and we think like that. May I add something real quick?
Yeah.
In your conversation, it made me think of, in nuclear medicine, we set up IVs and we stick people with needles every single day, all day long. And one day my daughter asked me, she said, doesn't that make you feel bad? I said, no, because we're helping people.
And just talk about the idea, first of all, nuclear medicine. Wow. It's phenomenal what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely astounding. So, yeah, see the potential, the opportunities, and the good that's there. And that's the same point. Is here's the guy who's complaining he never had good in his life, and he's complaining to the Rebbe who lived through pogroms, who lived through Warsaw. He lived through the Holocaust, lost families in the Holocaust, lost his father to the Russian communist regime, married no children, and you're complaining to the Rebbe that you've never had joy in your life? Come on. There needs to be a reality check to say, count your blessings. Count your blessings, right? And, I've mentioned this before, but the book by Dr. Edith Ayer called The Choice, and that space between, when things happen and your response to those things, you get to choose how you respond. Are you going to be focusing on the opportunity, the potential, the great that's available? Or are you going to focus on, what hurts and what's the negative? Back to the medical example, right? So recently, in the past couple of years, when I've been in and said that on a pain scale, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the worst pain you've ever had, how does it hurt? And I now look at them and I say, I've had a kidney stone. I know what 10 actually looks like. So this is like a 4. Whereas before the kidney stone, like a 4 would have been, oh, it's a 10.
I hate that question, because when you say, well, I think it's maybe a 10, and then God says, well, you think you've seen something?
Show you.
Well, if you ask anyone in medical, you say, I think it's a 10, they say, you spoke to me, it's not a 10. When you're at 10,
Yeah, true.
Not screaming in pain. It's not.
Rabbi, I think the answer that these people are being given is not very helpful. I mean, it's sure that there's a lot of good in the world and they don't realize how lucky they are, but you have to address their individual pain too.
Yep.
Why are they in so much pain now? And you can't just write it off by saying there's a lot of good that you're not seeing.
Right. So that is true when we're dealing with a patient or we're dealing with helping someone else, right?
Right.
But what we're talking about for ourselves,
Okay.
right? So for ourselves, we need to do our own reality check. Now, in the case where this guy is writing to the Rebbe is able to acknowledge his suffering, but also say, but what about the fact that you have children, the fact that you've been married for 45 years, you're still together, start to gently point out, all those things that you could be counting as the great blessings of the day, and share those. But again, like you said, you have to do it lovingly and gently, even when we want to slap them in the face.
Doesn't that go back to the issue of the Jews when they were going through on the when they left Egypt, and then all the miracles that they had, so many miracles that it was normal to them, and they didn't perceive them as miracles anymore.
Right.
But they were still miracles, and they were unable to see him because their vision was clouded by what they thought was everyday normal occurrences.
Right. So, if you have, according to David's example there, you wake up in the morning and your food is prepared. It's always a sunny day. There's always an even temperature, and your food and your drink and your opportunity to sit and learn, and that's your normal day. Then, yeah, if you stub your toe, that's rough. But come on, right? Let's do the reality check of all the things that we truly are blessed with. And to me, I just keep coming back to the idea of, good Lord, we live in America, and we live 200 years into this experiment of America. If we look at the history of the world, like, whoever had it,
you could just
now,
stop at we live.
Yes, yes, exactly. So that's the next story here, right? Choosing gratitude. So this story is a story about someone. Now I'm going to skip to the next one. The Rebbe's favorite prayer, right? So when Nachum was a 9-year-old boy and he was delivering groceries, he went to the Rebbe's house frequently to deliver groceries to the Rebbe's wife, the Rebbetzin, and he took the opportunity, because a 9-year-old, you still have enough chutzpah to ask questions and things. And he asked the question of, like, what's the Rebbe's favorite prayer? And we'd think it would be Kol Nidre, or, some Maida Ani. The prayer we say at the very beginning of the morning, which is just basically saying, thank you, God, for giving me a new day to start over. And if we look at the morning blessings that we say every morning, actually go through them, and see what they're referring to, the fact that we can actually get out of bed with strength, and that we can be out on our own 2 feet, that we actually have clothes, we have shoes, that those things, if we actually started counting those as our blessings, then
That's probably why they're there.
Exactly. They're there to start us off to say, wow, look at all the amazing good things that we have that are given to us, the blessings that we have, and how much we could be gracious for all the things that are given to us. So, vessels of blessings. According to Chassidus, the words and feelings of gratitude that we express to God for the blessings we already have in our lives, those actually become the vessels and vehicles for more blessings, more abundance to flow into our lives. So in other words, when we actually show gratitude for what we're given, my mom taught me this years ago. She said, when you're getting birthday presents, if you don't send a thank you card, don't expect them next year. Right? So you're a little kid and you expect the presents to come in, and at some point down the line, are you actually having gratitude for what's given to you? And then we start seeing that gratitude actually brings more back to us. Right? It's just in a simple fashion. The more we, and especially if you think about that in any relationships, right? In relationship building, one of the things they talk about is building an emotional bank account. Right. So whether it's spouses or it's friends or it's siblings, right? The more deposits you make by saying something kind or doing something kind, then when you need to ask for something, when you need to make a withdrawal, or you do something stupid, you're given some more grace because you've made enough deposits in the bank that it's okay. And we all do some stupid stuff, right? So the more we can build up with all the gratitudes, then the more it comes back. I had this week, you know, as you know, had my birthday this week, and on Shabbos I made sure that I received an aliyah before that, and it happened to be that someone sitting at the table, a rabbinical student who was sitting at the same table, he also had a birthday this week, and when I told him, I said, happy birthday, he said, happy birthday, and then he said, may this be the best year ever. And I said, amen. And I thought, wow, I don't even know what that would look like. I mean, stop and think. I mean, all the things I have had and been blessed with over 64 years. I don't know how you'd have a best year. I mean, that would be Mashiach. I don't think it could be. With all the blessings we've had, what else can you get already? My parents, I remember when I was a teenager commenting, I don't know the context, but I made some comment about, you know, that we're rich. And my dad was like, what? He said, I mean, come on, we're rich. And he said, middle class and a lower third of that. And I said, how? We have vacations and we're not missing anything. Well, what else could a person want in life? And my dad just smiled and said, keep it that way.
Yeah.
But to me, it was like we had skiing vacations. I got to go scuba diving. We traveled the world. I couldn't imagine what else there could be. So the more we have gratitude for what we're blessed with, then it seems to be that every time we say thank you, there's a response from God saying, oh yeah, we can make it better. We can still do one. Yeah. I mean, it is still a two-way street. There's also an expectation of living up to it, right? You know, I gave you another year of good health. What'd you do with it? Right? So there's a part of that. But at the same time, it's being able to find the beauty and the goodness and the opportunities. And the opportunities is an important part. I'm looking at the Rebbe, what the Rebbe wrote about vessels for blessing, right? I'm not implying that one is supposed to struggle for a living or not enjoy perfect health, God forbid. My point is that perhaps the reason for your weak health and your difficulties in earning a living is your failure to acknowledge God's blessings to you in far more basic things with good health and abundant sustenance, the blessings of sons and daughters, and being able to fulfill mitzvahs, serve God. If one does not acknowledge the explicit good that's bestowed upon them from above, and particularly one's actually lacking the recognition, is so extreme that it results in statements such as you expressed in your letter, I've never had any good in my life, is it any wonder that more blessings are not coming from to you? I mean, the people that we've worked with, right? The ones who kvetch about everything. We don't even want to work with them, let alone give them. We don't want to give them opportunities because they're just going to kvetch about what they didn't get. It's one of my old favorite mother-in-law jokes. She's like, you know, she comes to visit for his birthday, gives him 2 ties. He goes upstairs, he puts on a tie, comes back downstairs, and she says, what, you don't like the other one? So when you can't win, but if we have that gratitude, you know, I always think about that same, you know, the same time guy that gets the 2 ties, you know, he could go up and he could come down and get that response, right? But he could also say, wow, they're both beautiful. I want to put one on, but help me choose because I can't choose from between the 2.
His mother-in-law would say, who are you and what did you do with my son-in-law?
Or more likely she would say, what, you still can't make a decision?
Well, there's that old joke. Have you ever heard about the grandmother in Miami Beach. She's walking along the beach with her grandchild, and the weather's getting a little bit rough, and they're walking along the beach, and all of a sudden the waves are higher, it turns nasty, and a wave comes in and takes her grandchild away from her out into the ocean. And she's crying and living and praying as hard as she can. And finally, the wave comes back in, and her grandchild is brought back in, and he's alive and well, maybe coughing a little bit, but he's okay. And what does the grandmother say? He had a hat.
Yeah.
Where's his hat? Well, wait a minute. Be thankful that he's still alive. Hear about that? That's a booby grandmother for you sometimes.
Exactly. So, as we set up the framework of a positivity bias, right? We're not negating the horrible things, and we're not saying we don't have to deal with them. But what's the foundation? Where's the foundation? The foundation is a foundation of gratitude, or as we say, an attitude of gratitude. If we're always looking at the cup half full, if we're always saying, is it a thorn bush that has roses, or is a rose bush that has thorns? It's the same bush. It's how are you choosing to perceive? And then based on how you choose to perceive, you still have to respond to the other pieces. But you'll come in with a stronger commitment and a better chance of good outcome, is because you're coming in strong, and you're coming in with a good attitude. You're coming in with a positivity bias. And again, going back to the idea of the battle plan, right? If you don't think you can win, you're not gonna. But if you plan for all the potential negative things, but you come in with the expectation as if we're absolutely winning, you will. And you'll manage the challenges along the way. But it begins with having an attitude of gratitude and an abundance perspective. So, as we were talking about before, as Stan brought up, right now there are big challenges in the world. We're facing some serious stuff, and as Rudy said, we've been here before. We've been here before, right? But during the course of this week, as things came in, what things did you choose to celebrate? I'd like to hear from you some things that you chose to acknowledge the good and celebrate the good, even in the midst of all the negative.
Well, I can say that it's almost 2 weeks since my brother has passed away, and I'm having such beautiful remarks about what a good person he was and how he did wonderful things. And I think that that's good in the world. And I feel it in my heart and my soul that it's a warm feeling to know that he was well thought of.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So in the midst of our loss, it doesn't change the pain. It doesn't change anything about the loss. But we're choosing to look at the good and the feeling of good that's coming from it. Absolutely. Another example.
Why are you gonna involve it? I shot my mouth off last week, somebody else's turn.
Well,
Well,
you
there's
know how
never-
those who've been around know that if you don't speak up, you're going to get called on. So you might as well.
I was about to say, in South Texas, I appreciate the fact that the sun hasn't consumed me yet.
Yeah, give it time.
Yeah, I concur on that one.
3 years in
Okay.
El Paso.
So Eliron, let's take that for example, right? So I remember living in Houston, Texas in the 70s, and I remember going from an air-conditioned house to an air-conditioned car to an air-conditioned office to school, right? And I remember breaking into a full-blown sweat just getting from the house to the car or the car to the school, right? So
That's
what
in
you
Houston.
said is we have the opportunity to celebrate the air conditioning as opposed to focusing on the heat index.
Mhm.
Yeah,
and,
right.
and not even mention the fact that given the choice between Texas or North Dakota, where it's been below 35 for a month already,
So you can't complain.
right? All right, next up.
Given thanks this week for being able to, at age 75, still work in psychiatric nursing and pick up 30-pound boxes and get them to my son and still
Over and
be
over
able
and
to
over
work all
again.
night.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I had a physical yesterday, and the nurse practitioner who did it said, "I don't know why you're here. You're perfectly healthy." I said, "I'm here to hear you say that."
Just want to get a confirmation.
See, and this nurse practitioner says this to a very brittle diabetic
But I'm a brittle diabetic, but
with no risk factors.
no, but I'm okay. I
Yes,
can
you're
I can
okay.
function. I can
You-
get up. I can do what I want to do. And with a few interruptions for a seizure here and there, I'm fine.
Judy, my dear, you're much better than okay.
And I think again, if we pause for a moment, we could focus on the medical condition,
Mhm.
or we could say, wow, just 50 years ago, that was not even a possibility.
25 years ago, it wasn't a possibility.
Mhm.
The technology I'm using to stay okay wasn't
And
in
Rabbi,
existence.
Incredible.
talking about your heart surgery,
Yeah,
a very positive but very depressing fact is that most of these great discoveries are made when? During times of war, when all kinds of horrible, horrible things happen, and then our medical profession rises to the occasion and benefits all of us from that. So the sacrifice has a little bit good in it too.
absolutely. And that's true not only in the medical technology, but think back to the fact that everybody is playing around with cell phones today. That
Oh God,
technology
yes,
came from the military.
that's not altogether positive. And we're going
Granted.
through that.
Nothing
We're
is.
going through that right
Granted.
now with two
But-
of our granddaughters.
But how many people who are benefiting from GPS on their cell phone, right, and not realizing that that technology came because of military advances,
Yep.
right?
Exactly.
So again, yes, the military necessity was not necessarily a positive one, but tremendous positive things came out of it.
Yes, indeed.
So
Well, look at
we
all-
could focus
look at-
on the negative or the positive.
Look at all the trauma that takes place in Israel
Mhm.
daily. And they're tops, unfortunately, tops in trauma, and they go all over the world and teach their techniques to the surgeons all over the world,
Right.
and their medical advances, and also their equipment. That look at all the equipment that's been invented by Israel.
Yep.
I was at Camp Atterbury. I've spent a number of summers at Camp Atterbury in Indiana, because NISA, National Emergency Services Academy, is there for part of Civil Air Patrol. And I was there a year or 2 years ago, and the base commander saw me, a Jewish chaplain, beard and all, And he said, hang on, I got a dozen Israelis on the other end of the base. Come here, you got to go talk to them. Of course, so they were all thrilled that there was like a Chabad rabbi in Indiana. Oh my! And in uniform.
That's
Ah,
great.
And another positive thing, I bet they all have to do tefillin.
there you go.
Did you have your set with you?
Of course.
Oh,
Of course.
Of course.
Don't go anywhere without it. Yeah. So again, the positive things, right? What were the Israelis doing there? They have a tremendous expertise in search and rescue in demolished buildings.
Yep.
And they were teaching that to Indiana Guard.
Mhm.
So that technology that comes out of negative, yet turns around is used for positive and for good things.
Well,
So
look at Rockets to Roses. They use the Scud missiles to come
yes,
over
yeah.
from,
Got one
The other
on right
side.
now.
and they
Same
make it.
here.
I have too. They make it into jewelry.
yeah,
They
And we
also make
got
it into candlesticks.
candlesticks. We got candlesticks made from them.
Yes.
I have a card holder with doves from that.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
And a
beautiful.
lot of other things.
I've seen,
yeah.
I've seen
That's
that one.
awesome.
I'd love to get that one too.
The
so
dove.
this idea then is that whole idea that we see from the biblical idea of turn the weapons into plowshares, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Finding something to do. Now, it does not negate the rockets have to stop.
Right.
No, absolutely not.
Doesn't change that,
Right.
right? But we can focus on the negatives, or we can focus on the positives while
Yeah.
still dealing with the negatives. And that bias towards seeing the good within and the potential ahead, that's what we want to focus on. We want to be able to create that positivity that gives us the strength to face even tough situations with a good attitude, a positive attitude, and to move and pull forward.
What's your positive take on what's this war is going to bring about?
Hopefully,
I-
the elimination of Hamas.
My
Yeah.
positive take,
That's one positive thing.
my positive take is that I know so little of what can be. I want to be totally surprised
Mhm.
at the amazing outcome.
Pleasantly, I hope.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
We'll get to it a little bit later on, right? But there's this discussion about after the Holocaust. There are those people who said, yes, but we got Israel out of that.
Yeah.
We got a state of Israel out of that. And the Rebbe's response was, that's horrific and insensitive.
Yeah.
That result was not worth what we went through. There has to be more. And we will hold God accountable
Mhm.
for that. But the realization that God sees a much bigger picture and we're only holding a couple of pieces of a 1,000-piece puzzle. You ask what my take is. I am so anxious to see the whole puzzle. I am so excited for what that's gonna look like, that it moves me forward every day to do something more. To do something more to get that puzzle solved, to do something more to be able to see that big puzzle, because I know it's there. Right now, I just see the pain, but I want to see that huge.
Don't forget that we're just small pieces of that puzzle.
Mhm.
Yep. Yep.